All right, everybody, welcome to preview week for Willamette, the Pinot Noir auction. The wines featured in this tasting series are small lot bottlings for our exclusive trade auction. Contact Emily at the WVWA. I will put her email address in the chat if you don't know about the auction and you'd like to learn more. For this year's auction, we are pleased to announce a charitable partnership with the James Beard Foundation Food and Beverage Investment Fund for Black and Indigenous Americans as part of the Open for Good campaign. All funds raised on auction lots beyond the opening bids, as well as through the Paddle Raise Pledge, will go to the investment fund. And I will drop their website in the chat as well for you to learn more. I also want to take a moment to thank our auction sponsors for their ongoing support. And now I'd like to introduce today's panelists. Representing Lot 7, I have Justin Hirigoyen of Twomey. Representing Lot 8, Guillaume of Résonance. Representing Lot 11, Gary Horner of Erath Winery. Representing Lot 12, Barbara Gross of Cooper Mountain Vineyards. And representing Lot 14, Kate Payne-Brown of Stoller Family Estate. And now I'll kick it off to our host, Eugenia Keegan of Jackson Family Wines. Eugenia, they're all yours.
Julia, thank you so much. We are super excited to have you with us today in our Zoom room. I'm assuming you're all over the country, and we can't see you, but you can see us. And I'm super excited about our collaboration with the James Beard House this year, and we look forward to handing a check to them with lots of money. So a reminder to you that this is where you can help us help them. We're going to kick it off here. This is the opening day of a five-day week. They're all 5-day weeks. But this is an unusual week because each day we're going to have 3 of these tastings at 9, 11, and 2. And each day we'll have a different moderator. So we are number 2 now, and we're learning, and we hope you learn along with us how to have this virtual tasting. Not much else to say. I think we need to hear right from the winemakers, and I'd like to turn this over to Justin from Twomey to talk about the 18 vintage and his auction wine. Justin?
Thanks so much, Eugenia. It's great to be here. I want to echo those thanks. Thank you to everybody for coming. I think we'd all love to be in person and pour our wines for everybody, but this format, gives us a chance to maybe get a little more in depth with everybody. So. Sincere thanks from me and the team at Twomey for coming. We really appreciate it. So my name is Justin Hirigoyen. I'm the winemaker for Twomey Cellars. Our lot is lucky number 7 this year. It's called Prince Charming. It is definitely not named after me. I know you're all surprised, but it is named after a special place. So we, in 2017, acquired the Prince Hill Vineyard in the Dundee Hills. And so the Prince part comes from the vineyard. And then the charming part, I think, is kind of a great, indicator or descriptor for the 2018 vintage. I think that, on the whole, maybe a little bit drier than we're used to. And there was this beautiful harvest window that, it allowed us to really pick things when they were fully ripe. So there is a forward and charming element in the 2018 wines that I find for sure. So Prince Charming, Prince Hill Vineyard, kind of a charming vintage. And in this wine, we use predominantly Clone 95. And that's kind of the third part of this, which is an homage to the history of the place and the history of kind of Oregon wine growing. Clone 95 was, you always take our winemaker suitcase clone stories with a large helping of salt, but it was brought over by Dick Erath, who was the former owner and the person who planted Prince Hill Vineyard. And it came from Clos Vougeot. And it was forgotten for several years after he had sent it to Davis. And he kind of got that letter in the mail of your material's ready. And so he, some of the original plantings were at the Prince Hill Vineyard. And so we really love the kind of historical element that comes from the clone. So that's kind of the overview I have of last year because, I know you all don't necessarily have one, but cheers, and I'll try and keep it short. But, it's, to me, this Clone 95 and the expression of Dundee Hills it's a really complete picture of Pinot in the area. You get those really beautiful berry fruits, but you also have some of the spice and some of the kind of earthy funk that comes along with it. On the palate, the 2018 vintage is on full display. There's a really nice elegance to the wine. It's forward, but there's still that structure, that tension, and that minerality that we've come to know and love and expect from the Prince Hill Vineyard. So we're really trying to capture the energy of a place in these wines. Twomey has become pretty spread out. We make single vineyards from Santa Barbara all the way up to Dundee Hills in Oregon. But we're big on, becoming a part of the community and discovering the energy of the place. So, we started in the Russian River. We have a hub in the Russian River. We moved to Anderson Valley. We have a hub in the Anderson Valley. Small teams of people who live kind of every day. They breathe the air of the place. They walk the vineyards. And we've tried to bring that to Oregon. So with this Prince Hill site, which we acquired in 2017, we have a full-time, we have one employee of the month because we have one associate winemaker up here, Chris Burrow. Shout out to you, Chris. And I know you're on the line. And he lives the vineyard, walks it every day. He oversees the farming and the winemaking. And then I bug him from time to time. So we really try and capture the spirit of the place, the vintage, and the community and the history as well. To me personally, my last name is Basque. We're from the French side of the Basque region, and there's always a community table, a family table. My father is a chef, and so I kind of gravitated into the wine business because of that. And it's these shared moments around, a great bottle of wine with great food where, there's that time capsule element. So for this 2018 vintage, this special, the special bottling, we can open this in, 5, 10, 15 years and think about back to, what 2018 was like. And 2020 will be the same way. I think we're all ready to be on the other side of it, but we'll be able to open the wines from 2020. I'm sure they're going to be fantastic and have it around a great meal with friends and family and think back to, what our headspace was and how fortunate we were at the time. So, we try and kind of weave all those elements together, but this lot hopefully is a complete picture of a place. So the Prince Hill Vineyard in Dundee Hills, it has that beautiful red jewelry soil, those kind of gentle sloping hillsides. It's, roughly 500 to 700 feet. So it has that beautiful sunshine that we're looking for, that southeastern aspect. And hopefully what translates into your glass is a true reflection of that, the 2018 vintage, and then some of the people and the history behind the wine. So I know everybody out there is, thinking about our restaurant partners and my family coming from a culinary background, we feel that as well. So thank you for coming today. Thank you for supporting a great cause. And I hope that lot 7 is high on your list and don't be shy. So you don't have to take my word for it. Hopefully some of you got samples. But if not, cheers. 2018 is showing great. I'm really happy to be a part of, this panel and kind of everybody who's on here. So I think that's really what I had to say about lot 7. I'll pass it back and let somebody else have a chance to talk. So Eugenia, back to you.
Justin, thank you very, very much. A couple things. It's interesting about the 18 vintage. In our earlier chat, we had Chris Herman from 00, and he named his lot Le Rêve. And his comment was it was a dream vintage. And you've got a charming vintage. So I have a feeling we're going to see that theme today and all through the week, because 18 was an absolutely spectacular vintage. In fact, when we thought about not having the auction this year, I think one of the things we most lamented was how can you have, we all took the time to bottle these unique lots from 2018, this brilliant vintage. And it was like, how can we not share these with the rest of the world, because the wines are so exquisite. A question for you. I didn't know this. Is it true that the vineyard, that vineyard, by the way, everybody has to agree, it's an A+ vineyard. It's just a magnificent site. Gary, of course, can be nodding with a lot of confirmation there, having made wine from that vineyard for years. But it is really a stunning and spectacular piece of property. Congratulations on that. But is it true that it was named after Prince, truly the rock and roll star?
Well, I think like a lot of great places, there's a lot of lore around everything. But so I always question what people tell me. But yes, it was named after the music idol. I believe it was Dick's son was a big fan. So
yeah, it would have been Cal, because it wouldn't have been Eric, so it would have been Cal. But I did not know that. That was so fun to learn. Thank you very much. That's lot 7. We're going to go on to lot 8, which is Résonance, and with us is Guillaume Large. He will apologize for his accent, but his English is brilliant. So Guillaume, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Eugenia. Thank you very much. Good morning. Hello, everybody. So I'm very happy to speak with you this morning on behalf of Résonance. So as you can hear, Résonance reson with friends because Résonance is the project of the Maison Louis Jadot in the Willamette Valley, you know, and for us it's very important because for the first time from the foundation of the Maison Louis Jadot, we are outside of Burgundy and it's in the Willamette Valley. So, you know, the foundation of Jadot was in 1859, a good sign because the same year, that was the foundation of the state of Oregon. So, voilà, the beginning of a true story. You know, if we work in the Willamette Valley today, it's because we have the feeling that this is a great terroir, a terroir like in Burgundy, and the idea, but to learn about this terroir, to do the same, to use the same technique than at the Maison Louis Jadot, but to reveal really all the complexity of the Pinot Noir and the Chardonnay here in the Willamette Valley. Alors, to do that, that takes time, you know. We started the project in 2013. That was the revelation of Jacques Lardière and Thibaut Gaget, the discovery of Résonance Vineyard, the vineyard where we have selected the lot, number 8, Résonance Vineyard Pinot Noir, so located in Carlton, on the western side of Carlton, Yamil Carlton AVA. It's really a beautiful location, very close to the coast range, so big impact, big influence of the rain shadow of the coast range, you know, and of course the soil, the geology here, very complex, old marine sedimentary soil, so that give an expression, that give a minerality, you know, that we can find in the great terroir. And so for the block, for the lot, sorry, we selected the block number 5. Alors we didn't decide the number of the block, but that was the selection of Kevin Chambers, the previous owner of Résonance Vineyard, and this block has been planted in 1981, so already aged Pinot Noir, and the originality, they are ungrafted, non-rooted. So for us, it's more attractive, you know, because as you know, in Burgundy from the end of the 19th century, where all the vineyard has been grafted, and due to the phylloxera damage. And here, it's a direct connection between the roots and the fruits. So nice expression. Voilà. And of course, this 2018 vintage. So you spoke about that, Justin, but really, and I don't know, in Burgundy we would say un grand millésime. Here we can say maybe an outstanding vintage. Everything was perfect. The quality of the grapes, you know, that was amazing. It was very important for us, 2018, because that was the inauguration of our new winery that we built very close to the Résonance Vineyard, you know, at the bottom of the hill, at the foot of the hill of Résonance Vineyard. And alors we had to use our new equipment, you know, the sorting table, but everything was perfect. So the grapes were beautiful, ripe, perfect balance between the acidity and the sugar, a color, wow, beautiful, you know, the fruit were beautiful. And so we were able to have a long maceration for this block number 5, about 4 weeks. So for the Pinot Noir, you know, it's long, with a delicate extraction. We prefer that, you know, a long extraction, step by step with the punch down, very important, but to take the time to have the expression of this complexity. And then the aging in barrels, you know, the same barrels that we use at the Maison Jadot in Beaune, with 17 months in this barrel. And this lot, you know, I selected this lot on 1 barrel from with oak, you know, coming from the forest of Tronchet, one of the finest oak, you know, in France. Sorry, that give more complexity, that give more delicateness maybe to the wine. Or I did the same, you know. I have a glass of this wine, but this is really, when we speak about harmony, I think really 2018 is a great resume of what is harmony, because it's an expression of a concentration, you know, of a lot of aromas, you know, not too powerful, delicate like is the Pinot Noir, but very energetic, you know, with black fruits, red fruits, delicate spices, a touch of violet flowers. This is a little bit original, but in this block 5, the whole Pommard, every year we have that. Et puis, ben, the fineness of the structures, the structures, the tannins, you know, are present, not too powerful, but just what we need, you know, to have a great expression. So voila, and I think this is really a vintage that we need to be patient, maybe before to drink, or whether due to this great season that we have in 2018, and this is maybe a particularity of the Willamette Valley, you know, the wine is already very expressive, very open, you know, very, I say energetic, but this is really that, you know, and we can test the energy of the vineyard, you know. The sign of, as I told you, a great vintage. Yes. Voilà.
I love the word harmony. That was a real takeaway, Guillaume, because I'm surprised nobody has an auction lot with that name, although maybe they do. I haven't looked at them all, but it's just a perfect word for really what was an exquisite vintage that we all really loved making wine from. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
On to lot 11, which is Erath. Gary Horner. Good morning.
Oh, good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you're at.
Depending on where you're listening from.
That's right. It's after 5 somewhere. Well, it's great to be part of this group, the A team. I look around the screen here. But what's really cool is that it's the 18 vintage, and I don't have a lot to add to what our previous speakers have said, but for me personally, the dryness of the vintage was, to me, the biggest challenge, was to manage water stress in the vines. In this particular vineyard is named Willakaya Vineyard. It's in the Yosemite Appalachian, but it's a lot of that marine sediment. And there are many areas that are very, very rocky. And I think the deepest soil is like maybe 3 feet. So to manage soil moisture in a hot and dry vintage is tough. So I kind of sweated bullets here. It's a challenge in that the grapes want to dehydrate, but if the flavor and tannin's not developed yet, the name of the game is you need to wait for that. And so sometimes that's scary, and you can get up to bricks that might be 24.5 or 25, but that's what you need to do in order to get the flavors. How about flavor and tannin development? So this wine is actually a couple of blocks right in the sweet spot of the vineyard. In the vineyard, gosh, we got quite a range there. It ranges from maybe 300 feet all the way up to 865 feet. And we have 48 blocks. 48 blocks. It drives me nuts because it's a lot to keep track of Pinot Noir. Again, mid-slope here. This is the area where there's not too much slope, just gradual slope. It sees all-day sun. And I think the most important part of this particular site is we get the Van Duzer corridor winds. These are winds that come in through a corridor from the coast and cool us down dramatically in the afternoon. And you can be standing there maybe 3:30, 4 o'clock, and you can feel the breeze kick in. It's refreshing. And that helps us to slow down maturation and to keep acidity. So again, this is actually all 777. It's the first time I've really focused on just solely 777. And we also use the Caduce barrel that Jadot uses. Of course, they own the coopery, so maybe we don't get the best ones. But here too, we're using Transe. I like that barrel. Very, very gentle contribution to the wine. Very, very fine grain, subtle nuances. But what you can't take away from this wine is, due to its location and the soil moisture situation, the rockiness, this wine tends to have a little more of a broader shoulder profile, if you want to say that. Maybe a little bit of 5 o'clock shadow. It's a little rough around the edges when it first goes into the bottle, but my wife and I opened this last night, and it was a lot better than it went into the bottle. It was a little abrasive, and you can start seeing it now to round out a bit. And in day 2, it's really opening up. And to me, that's a sign. I'll leave this open for the next 5 days, and I guarantee it's still going to be a lovely wine. And similar to Prince Hill, though the sites are radically different, this is a wine I think easily could go 15 or 20 years. And I've had the benefit of being with Prince Hill for a number of years and seeing that development too. So this is exciting. You might be wondering about the name, and it's Marvel. And I saw a Saturday Night Live that had Billy Crystal on it in 1985, and he's impersonating Fernando Lamas, right? And it's kind of like the marbles in his mouth, and he says, "Marvelous, darling, just marvelous." And that stuck with me, and I kid you not. So I'll take a lot of my wines home and do blending trials right here in this countertop. And when you get to that one wine that just kind of rolls your socks up and down, I just say, "Marvelous, darling, simply marvelous." And now it's nuts. Okay, it's out there. So Marvel, hence the name.
Wow. This whole day was worth it to hear you do that.
Marvelous, darling.
Nothing else, Gary. I had never heard that, but you will never live that down.
That's right.
Yeah.
Not all.
Yeah, no, it's really great, the Marvel. I was waiting to hear that it was a marvelous vintage, and here we are. It's going to be all about this vintage. It's just so perfect. Thanks, Gary. We're going to move on to Barbara Gross, Cooper Mountain Vineyard, biodynamic, and have been for a very long time. It's an incredible piece of property, and Barbara grew up there and has been involved in that property her entire life.
Oh,
Barbara, over to you.
Thank you. Hard to follow Gary here, I gotta say.
The old guy's pretty good, isn't he?
Yeah. So it's sort of interesting to hear everybody's story. And this is actually the first wine from a vineyard that we bought in 2018, which was originally Olenek. And so this is my 5th vineyard. To be honest with you, I was still closing the vineyard in 2018. So there isn't a lot of really great depth and storytelling for me to tell you. But it has really nice minerality, red fruit associated with it. And it's just very lovely. And I would like to second everybody about what they're saying regarding the vintage. It's a really fun vintage. And I'm very excited about this new vineyard. This vineyard was originally a part of the Jacob Hill Vineyard and then went under the line of Olenek. We have renamed it after my mother. Again, we're looking to take this vineyard 100% biodynamic. We will have the certification on that in the future, next year actually. And
so this new vineyard, this is Chehalem Mountains, yeah?
Yeah, this is by your house. You can see this.
And what soil type are you on here? Chehalem Mountains having all 3.
Sure. So this vineyard, which is what we were so interested in the first place, has about 47 different soils associated with it. Yeah. So as a biodynamic vineyard and obviously interested in soil types predominantly, this specific block is actually Jory. So we have really great basalt that came with a really interesting landslide that happened about 20,000 years ago. So the rocks covering this vineyard are make for very singular wine. Probably the most challenging thing that we're learning about farming this biodynamically, obviously, is a lot of hand manual labor associated with all these rocks as sort of your topsoil. And then in addition to that, harvest picks are very, very challenging in that because it has all the rock as the topsoil, you really need to be on top of bricks shooting up quite quickly. So this came in about September 15th, 2018. It was nice and lovely. And then the name of the wine is something that I've been practicing all morning because I cannot pronounce this.
You noticed I didn't. Yeah, you noticed I left that together.
I chose this name sort of as an homage to our expansion of our fingerprint in the Willamette Valley. So it was interesting hearing the Twomey story about the acquisition of this beautiful vineyard. And then of course, the Résonance story about the acquisition of that beautiful vineyard. This is sort of our acquisition mode as a second generation winery in the Willamette Valley. And what I'm really wanting to do is just expand our biodynamic footprint. So it's called Eugenia. Yeah, I actually checked that pronunciation about 5 times this morning. So Eleusis in ancient Greece was the place of Demeter's agrarian cult gathering every year. So the farmers would gather to pay homage to Demeter, who again is the goddess of agriculture, in pursuit of soul. And as the land awoke each spring and the wildflowers returned, the cult became a celebration of Earth's rebirth, symbolizing the eternity of life, which flows from generation to generation. And it became one big, massive party, apparently. And so this is sort of our homage and a little bit of poking fun of the biodynamic woohoo cults. Obviously, we've heard it all for 25 years since we've been practicing. I sort of like to think about this party that they had annually, all these farmers, a little bit like the modern day Burning Man. That's in my head where I went with all of this. And we again had procured this vineyard to fuel our expanding biodynamic soul. And then of course I named it after my mother, who passed away in 1995 as an homage to all of the women who were pioneers in the Willamette Valley. This was Patty Green's favorite vineyard, or one of her favorite vineyards. And so sort of an homage to all of the women that we've lost along the way.
Barbara, how lovely. And congratulations on this new vineyard and
Thank you.
sharing your first vintage with us.
Yeah, first wine, first vintage.
Would you also share the date of this baccalaureate Burning Man party that we're having up there? Because I know everybody on this call will be there. I can't wait. It'll have to be after harvest, because all of us need to get through this harvest.
I actually, one of the first people to visit this was Chris Burrow.
There you
Chris,
go.
if you're Chris, silent Chris Burrow that everybody
Chris, you better be on this call, dude. You've already been called twice. Oh, Barbara, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lot number 14 is Stoller Family Estate. We have Kate Payne-Brown with us. Payne is a family name for us too, Kate. So every time I see your name, I think of my aunts and uncles, even though I'm sure you're totally not related. But
who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
We could be related. I didn't know that, but I'm going to start claiming that we are from now on.
A great idea. But before you do that, you might want to check the rest of the skeletons in the closet before you become a member of our family.
I've got a few in mine as well, so we can share some stories.
I think that's great. I think that's great. Kate, tell us about this wine from Stoller, please. Lot 14.
Well, thank you for having me, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm going to take a page out of Gary's book because I believe it's 5 o'clock somewhere in the world. And I feel like COVID times are also airport times, right? Like there's always an excuse to have a drink in your hand.
Yeah, 8 o'clock in the morning.
yeah, especially if you're trying to homeschool or deal with small children. But that's a whole other story. I think the 2020 lot will be something that has to deal with masks and, you know,
Kids.
dealing with like homeschooling. But so for those of you who don't know, I'm Payne-Brown, as Eugenia said, and I'm the winemaker here at Stoller Family Estate, focusing on the reserves and the legacy wines and all the small blends that I have a great privilege to make from off of this estate. And I've been here since 2015, and it's been a real pleasure to be a part of the Willamette Valley Wine Auction community and to create wines that really speak to a sense of time and a place. And I'm really excited to share that it's going towards the James Beard Foundation as well. I think it's going to be a remarkable contribution. Before we go in, I felt like I have to say Chris Burrow's name. Just give him another shout out. I feel like he's the poster person of our group today, so I'm stoked for him. But our lot, the turkey and the tree. So lot 14. So as Laura would have it, in the heyday, this is our property. It's about 400 acres. 220 of those acres are now planted. We're almost at our full planting capacity. And it was first, well, it's been in Bill Stoller's family since the early 1940s. It was converted over to a vineyard in 1995. But as the Lord would have it, in the heyday of its time, during its like working farm period, is that, I don't know if you can see behind me, but the whole hillside was white with turkeys. So at its full capacity, there was almost 500,000 turkeys on this hillside. So it looked not green like you're seeing behind me, but white. And so we feel like that's a part of the history. And then the tree is something that if you were to go right now on Stoller's website or on the webcam, you would see this iconic oak tree with a tire swing. And so we're just kind of thinking about, how do you tell the story of Stoller, right? And that's, both of these things are part of the story. So the 2018 vintage became the telling of the turkey and the tree, which is, so in thinking about that, I wanted to choose a couple blocks that were really a part of the iconic story. And this is an interesting mix. This is 777, block 32, which is in the heart of the vineyard. And then that's block 11 and block 21-1, both are Primard. So it's about 75% Primard, 25% 777. And as you know, as the story goes, like a lot of where 32 is now is where like the crux of where all the turkeys were. And it's an interesting section. It's thinner soils. The 777 that comes from that is like, it's really crushed violets. It's really red fruit. And I really, when putting this one together, I want to tell the story of Dundee Hills. And I think these sections really explain that. I don't know if you know this, Justin, but we are on the southernmost tip of the Dundee Hills, and we're often the town crier of the Dundee Hills. So if I start picking, then you should probably get your tanks cleaned, because you'll probably be picking about a week and a half after me. So you're welcome, Dundee Hills. You're welcome, Willamette Valley. But yeah, I try to make it known on Instagram, just so you know. We should. But yeah, that's really a part of the storytelling here, is try to show what is happening for this vintage and for this sense of place. So for the 2018 vintage, much like everybody was saying before, it's like visiting an old friend. And I feel like this is true whenever I'm opening a wine, however old it is. It's like, oh, hello, it's been a while. I kind of miss seeing you. And when smelling and tasting these wines, I'm always kind of instantly brought back to what was happening during that vintage. And the 2018 vintage was dreamy, right? Like it was warm. I mean, we did have to battle the tannin. I think the challenge was to figure out how to manage, you know, some of these riper characteristics. And certainly being on a warmer site, we, you know, picked it a little bit on the earlier in order to retain the acidity. When the east wind starts blowing here, that's when I really start freaking out. It's like, pull it all in, we're gonna lose acidity. Freaking out is a relative term, but we try to like make sure that it is created such that it is, again, harmonious, right? But I love the 18 vintage. You know, I think when it was happening and I was worried about it being warm, now to look back on these wines, they're just gorgeous. And this blend, because it's a micro blend, it's almost one of the harder blends that, or takes more time, because I can pull from elements all over the cellar and not just be creating blends that are from one specific section or tell one clone. So in doing that, I get a chance to really play around like artistic expression. So it's like, oh, what happens here? Let's take 10 gallons from this barrel. The team, I mean, God love them. They're always like, so you want 5 gallons from this barrel and then 1.5 gallons from this one? I was like, well, it's 10% of the blend. Yeah, I do. And you know, they're amazing, and we do it, and we hand blend this, and then we hand bottle it, and I think it comes through in this blend. What is speaking to me today is this idea of like ripe cherry, a lot of violets. It's like got this like nutmeg characteristic and this ferrous minerality. It just screams Dundee Hills. Like most of my time, almost all of my time in the Willamette Valley since I've moved back here in 2007 has been in the Dundee Hills. So I feel like I know it pretty well. And I think this is just completely indicative of what is the style for that area. So cheers. Happy to bring up the rear on this amazing group that has been nothing but on time and a great group to be a part of. So thank you.
Kate, thank you very much. So tell me, on Turkey Hill there, it is another one of the most beautiful vineyards in the Willamette Valley. And there's some Chardonnay that grows up there that is just absolutely Grand Crucian. I mean, it is so good. You have some beautiful, beautiful fruit to work with. But tell me, were those years and years of turkeys and their biological activity, did this, you know, we were talking about this with Alex Sokol-Blosser earlier. They had a vineyard where the folks put in a bunch of geese and they thought they would mow the lawn and poop a lot. They didn't, they did one and not the other. So let's put it this way, the thing never got mowed.
Yeah.
But was there a high organic material and everything in that vineyard because of that?
I think that is often the perception. I mean, it's a vigorous site, but I don't think that's solely because there were a lot of turkeys on here, and our yams are often pretty low. So you would think that like our yams would be through, our yeast is in mold nitrogen, which is the food for the yeast. You would think the nitrogen content would be high, but it's really not. I think we've seen I think some of the byproduct that we have seen of that is because of the farming in certain areas, there's like a thinner topsoil, which in my opinion makes for great wine anyway. So it's worked out in the end. But yeah, I agree. It's so interesting. I mean, I love the Chardonnay, and unfortunately for me, I get a chance to work. We have not only Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but we have like Aligote and Pinot Blanc and Syrah and Tempranillo, and I get a chance to play with all of those. So I'm a Gemini. Lots of different personalities come out on a regular basis, and it works to my advantage.
How fun. And it's great to know that you are the lead in picking. It's always important to know who your lead is in any AVA. And all you just sit back and wait for them to start, and then you go get really, really frantic and furious. You talked about sort of winemakers freaking out. I don't unless you've seen a winemaker freak out. It's maybe a chef, but it's its own gig all the way. I do want to remind everybody that those cellar guys that took out those 5 gallons here and 10 gallons there, they have to go back and top those barrels up too. They don't just get to pull out that wine and leave it. It's not the end of the exercise. So, Kate, thank you so much. There is a question here about how many acres are in Turkey Hill and Prince Hill vineyards, on those 2 vineyards. Kate, start with you. How many acres there?
So, well, it's the turkey and the tree is a lot. The vineyard is all Stoller family estate, but it is 220 acres just over that planted.
Yeah. Yeah. Justin, Prince Hill?
Prince Hill right now is about 37.
Oh, baby. Is that some replanting going on there, or?
Yeah, original planting in 1983. Mr. Erath did a ton of experimentation, and there was some phylloxera in certain areas of own-rooted stuff. A lot of it still tastes really great, but we're just kind of cycling through. We planted a tiny little sliver of Chardonnay, which Chris and I are very excited about. And so it's always a process of renewing and using what we have and thinking about the future. So you could say 40, you could say 37, you could say 35. It depends on the season and what's there.
Look forward to the Chardonnay. The first time I met the family when they were up here was looking for Chardonnay property. So I know that the company's bullish on doing a Willamette Valley Chardonnay, and we're thrilled to have you join that group. We're a pretty bullish group of Chardonnay producers. Thank you, everybody, for talking about your individual wines. And Julia, I'm going to look to you. What's the chat room have to say to us?
Yeah, we have a question so far from the chat room here, and then I had a couple from registration as well. Folks, if you've got questions, just pop them into the chat or the Q&A. First one from Richard here in the chat. How do you compare 2018 to 2016 for both Pinot and Chardonnay? Interesting question.
Interesting question. Who's got both under their belt? Gary, you want to start that one? You got both of those vintages.
Yeah, to me, 16, if you look at the range of vintages, we had a string of really hot vintages, and 16 brought us back to what I consider a little more Pinot-ish or characteristics of the area. I'm not knocking hot vintages, but they do present some challenges for this group as winemakers. And I don't want to say 16 was easy, but what came out of the side was more representative, I think, of the long-term history of the Willamette Valley. So I quite love 16. So drinking great right now, but I did not have the challenge of dehydration and in 16 like I did in 18.
Yeah, it's interesting. 16 seemed to be the first vintage that kind of cracked that warm code after all those years. And I think to Gary's point, when you're trying to make high acid, high elegant, low alcohol Pinot Noir, those vintages actually can be more challenging than even rainy vintages, particularly if you've been doing that for a long time. Kate, you've been around long enough to do 16 and 18?
Yeah, so 16 to me was defined by how small the clusters were. So the clusters were definitely bigger in 18. And so it allowed for a little bit slower ripening. 16, they were like these little tiny grenades, which is great for concentration, but it also meant because of that, they didn't have to take as long to ripen. And again, those east winds came and we had a lot of concentration. I felt like a lot of ripeness as well. The wines, it was interesting. It was 2016 was the earliest vintage that I've ever worked with. We started bringing in sparkling August 18th, which is 3 weeks after I had my second child. So that proved to be a challenge unto itself. And I'm often think about that when I tasted 2016. But I love the wines now, but I remember thinking about making sure that we had enough acidity and also battling the tannins because they were muscly. And now because of that, setting up that kind of foundation, the wine has so much longevity. It was just about managing the ripeness and managing the tannins. And I think the 2016, we're going to tell that story for a long time. The 18 is something similar, although because the clusters were larger, that I feel like the shape of the tannin is different. It's a little, right now it's more fleshy and opulent, and I'm not battling this like muscular tannin that we did in 2016.
Yeah, I don't think people quite understand the tannin challenge. It's a big one for us. Any other comments on the comparative vintages? All righty.
I had another question from Register. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Guillaume, did you want to add something?
No. Just for me, the difference between 16 and 18. Yeah. 16, well, this is it was very early. Kate, it's totally true. Just at Résonance Vineyard, for example, we picked the the 10th of September 2018. It was the 22nd. So that gives a difference. You know, the season was very early, and that gives something very very open, very expressive. You know, the 2016. I have to say it's a little bit too easy to drink. It's really the expression of the fruit, of a great vintage. But with 2018, I think we have a level a little bit higher with a complexity, with this harmony, you know, that we spoke. That gives something maybe a little bit more complex.
Mm-hmm. And maybe those broad shoulders that that Gary was talking about.
Yeah. Hey, Eugenia, I have a comment. I've been in the Willamette Valley since 1988, and I had the benefit of having wines out of the later 70s and early 80s when it actually still was a cool climate. And what I've seen over time, it used to be you would never plant over 700 feet. Just never do it. It was too cool. It was too exposed. And now what we find ourselves looking for, we want elevation. We have a vineyard that's at 1,000 feet, and that's absolutely perfect. It stretches out the growing season and keeps the acidity and the bright fruits. But that just has to give you an idea of thinking about where we're planting, what we're planting. It's really taken a turn. And we're even looking for slopes that might be sloping off to the northeast a little bit, just to help keep it a little cooler. So there's many, many things that are in play. And thank goodness we've got Oregon State University to help really bring us along in viticulture from the 80s. But it's a different game today than it was. But I also think we are actually making better wines today than we ever have. So we're up for the challenge. I think we're doing all right.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I said, actually this came up earlier, Gary, in our earlier conversation about people climbing up the hill. Elevations, you used to your point, never plant above 700 feet. Now we're up to 1,000, 1,100, particularly with Chardonnays and sparkling and north-facing slopes. And something that most people don't know, because many people go to California before they go to Oregon, and they plant on all slopes. And in fact, north-facing slopes are lovely because they're a little cooler. And traditionally, we have not planted north-facing slopes in Oregon. But to your point, Gary, we're starting to see a little bit of movement. And it's not an absolute anymore. You don't just automatically disqualify a site like that. So it is a change, but it also gives us a lot of area to grow, literally, to continue to plant more vineyards and to be responding to obviously climate changes that we're trying to deal with now. And they are changing our farming practices and our winemaking practices. They're subtle, but I think that they've evolved. Over at Adelsheim, who is my partner, and they've been doing this for 50 years, and they have their annual chart that has obviously, bud break and bloom and all this, and it is so amazing. They've got it for 46 years or something, and it's super amazing to look at as everything shifts, because in all those early days, they didn't start picking until October 3rd, October 7th, October 9th. There's nobody who's picking in September. And, you can see over this 20, 30 years as that's evolved. And to Kate's point, she started sparkling in August. And most of us are starting sparkling in August now. So it's been quite a shift.
You can see vintage to vintage variability of up to 6 weeks on a given site. So deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, Prince Hill is an example of a vineyard that's been producing forever. And so there's another vineyard that's got this incredible longevity, and much of that is the original planting as well. Obviously, when you replant, you're in a whole new world. But if you're watching those old vines and that continuum, yeah.
So it's a super interesting point about where we're at in the Willamette Valley, particularly with this vineyard that I just bought. The vineyard was a phenomenal vineyard back in the late 80s and early 90s because it could ripen. It was an early site, and the entire vineyard was built with rootstock clones to make sure that it continued to be an early consistent site. It's about 300, 400 feet elevation. My entire life, I will spend slowing this vineyard down. So now I have to retool everything and ultimately replant this vineyard to do exactly opposite for when the initial blueprint of the site was. So it's exciting and challenging, all in one, and frustrating.
That's a great point, though. The idea that you don't just go back and replant. Everything that you're doing, you have to rethink, as if it were a new piece of property.
Within 20 to 30 years, that the game has just changed, very quickly. We'll just put it that way.
Yep.
A question just now from the from the chat, and depending on how people want to answer this, it may end up being our last one because it could be a juicy one. So I'm curious. Nancy Sabatini is curious. Are the majority of your plantings 777, Pommard, Dijon clones? Are those the most successful clones for Willamette Valley? Who wants to talk clones?
I don't.
Well, historically, like over the last maybe 20 years, that's been kind of classic. And I used to say, if I was putting in a vineyard today, it would be half Pommard, because I feel like that's the signature of Oregon. That's what put us on the planet in terms of Pinot Noir. But the Dijon clones are naturally early ripeners. So we have to maybe, again, rethink about what we're putting in a given location. So even these days, I mean, I'm starting to think about blocks we have at the Willikaya, that it could be advantageous to have a fairly late ripening clone of Pinot Noir. And one of the selections that David Lett brought north in the 65 was a clone called Vadensville. And there's actually two different Vadensvilles. One is 1A and the other is 2A. There's like a 10-day gap between those two. I would take the 1A just to give me that longer hang time, maybe in a warmer spot. And the other thing I do, and Justin's like probably going to high five, and he should, I would plant that clone 95. Absolutely. It's fabulous. I love it. But the really cool thing about it, one of the cool things, is it's fairly rot resistant. And in a wet or cool year, that can make or break you. And I have a feeling that Dick Erath is going to clean up on selling that material, and he should, because he brought it here and he made a mark with it.
So Gary, he's going to clean up for the third time or the fourth time or something.
That's in his genetics.
Some people have the Midas touch, and Dick Erath is one of them. And Justin, can I get in on that list, please, for clonal for budwood purchasing, please? I'm like, yes, can I do that?
Yeah, we're doing some small trials in California too, because I think we're interested in some of that, the ripening curve for that clone in California. And I think it's a question that we're all thinking about. I think for Twomey, we're kind of leveraging some of the California experience because we deal with that warmer ripening curve, and we're trying to use some of that decision-making from a viticultural and winemaking standpoint to inform what we're doing now in the replanting process for, because we're starting to branch out into higher elevations now, but think about, 20 years. I mean, there's a lot at stake for what you're putting in the ground now, for sure. And I think that's absolutely right that, the Dijon clones, they were doing the best in the tastings at the Lycée in Beaune, and, they were designed to ripen reliably and consistently in the cooler climate. And I think, we're seeing that in California, that we're questioning those choices, and maybe there's some, maybe more vigorous or, later ripening material that's going to be better suited to the future, along with how you plant, where you plant, spacing, aspect, all those things are going to come into play, but it's certainly a question that's top of mind for all of us, whether that's Oregon or California.
Yep. one of the challenges when you are going to plant is we don't have a lot of new material. So we're actually going back and looking at some of the original material that, as everybody's mentioned, the Dijon clones were brought in to accelerate some of the ripening, and now we're kind of shifting to the opposite. And there's just not a lot of new material, so it's been a challenge to find. We recognize the issue, but we don't necessarily have. You don't make plant material overnight, so it's a big issue, and it's on everyone's mind, of course.
And then it's going to change again.
And then it's going to change again. Yeah, yeah. We just don't know what, but it's what makes this so much fun, right? You never know. You just cannot know the answers, and that's what makes us go back to work every day. Is that there's never. It's not a puzzle where you can just solve it. Yeah, you always
agree.
Crossword with there's always things. There's always words you can't figure out.
Everything's so dynamic, it always is. And we're experimenting with some heritage clones, as well as Pear, Clara, Swan, Martini. We've had Wädenswil for some time. We're also being thoughtful about rootstock, right? Like I don't know very many people that are planting on RG. Not anymore, but that was something that was necessary with all the water that we had here. And so I think, and to, everybody's point, like looking at different aspects, looking at how to thoughtfully farm. I mean, we can't sit back on the previous paradigm. We're moving forward. And I think that's what makes Willamette Valley so interesting, right? There's the collaboration, and I'm sure like Guillaume coming from France, you might see a different type of collaboration here than you may see elsewhere, but people are pretty willing to share their stories and be experimental, and we have the ability to do that. And I think that's part of what makes the Willamette Valley so special.
I think we're small enough that we still recognize the need for each other in this, that even the bigger companies, Justin's company, my company, these are reasonably big companies, and we don't have any more answers than anybody else. Maybe we have a slightly bigger checkbook, but it's still the same dilemma as we all go at this together. So sharing information only makes every wine in Willamette Valley that much better, and it just reflects that much more positively on the rest of us. And I think we all truly believe that, so it's super easy to work under that set of thoughts, that sort of paradigm.
And just one thing, that's what Eugenia just said. That is the spirit of Oregon. That is what got us started. Had it not been for that, we might not be having this conversation today.
Yeah. Yeah, the Willamette Valley Wineries Association, the auction, the fact that we're all pitching in to support ourselves, it's a very, very Willamette Valley thing. There was one last question about the clones. Are they all French clones or California clones? They're all French clones. No such thing as a California clone. We still rely on the French for certain things. Thank you, Guillaume. And we're still looking to them. The French are still creating the new clonal material. They've got a lot going on over there that's actually pretty interesting. And if you talk to the right scientists, they will share. They won't sell it to you, but they'll share what they're doing. One day they will sell it, but right now they're doing their own experiments. But all the clones are French.
Yeah. Just one thing interesting too. What we are doing on the property. So we don't plant, one block with one clone. That we like to do, to think more about one location, one hillside, one terroir, in fact. And then we mix different clones, and then when it's done, when it's planted, we don't know which one is a Pommard, which one is a Dijon, which one is a Wädenswil. We think more about the location, and we do a massal selection when we do that. That means we don't speak about a clonal selection, one plant that you use at the very beginning, to reproduce, but massal, that means we speak about a lot of different plants, that we reproduce. It's a different approach. It's something a little bit traditional in Burgundy to the same, to have the expression of a terroir. So it's
You know,
interesting.
that's such a great point, Guillaume, because it's not the way we do things in the New World or ever, even before we had sort of these Dijon clones, et cetera. We always planted a block on the same rootstock and sign wood. It was, that's the way we've done it. The French have always done it as the Massal. Are you doing Massal on the new plantings at Résonance?
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
So as I told you, Résonance Vineyard, the old vineyard that we purchased in 2013, planted from the 80s, it's one block, one clone. It's traditional what they did at the beginning of the development of the vineyard. However, now from 2017, when I arrived, in the valley to follow that, yes, we are planting in massal selection on the property. So now it's about 60 acres of Pinot Noir that we planted like that, and 10 acres of Chardonnay, the same. So like that, we can limit a little bit, the influence of the vintage. Sometimes every year it's true, the Dijon are ripe a little bit earlier, but some vintage, gives a better expression of Pommard than Wädenswil or Coury or I don't know, 95, 115. Mixing that, you forget a little bit that, and you pick the block when finally you have a good expression of that. But of course, that gives more difference. That can impact a little bit the style, But finally, it's more an average, than speaking about or thinking about one clonal selection. Yes.
Yeah, I know a number of people are doing that in Chardonnay. Justin, are you, when you're replants, are you doing Massal, or are you guys doing our American tradition?
We're doing a little bit of both. For the most part, we're planting a diverse selection. It may be, clones from the nursery. It may be cuttings from either within the Prince Hill Vineyard or from other places. So we try and do both. We've got some. So Guillaume mentioned mixing in a bunch of different clones. We do have some, we call it the pickup sticks planting method. We do have a little bit of that to focus on kind of place. I like that as a thought experiment. It can be challenging to farm that way depending on what you are planting there. And so we certainly keep that in mind. We have some blocks that are set up that way. So, I think the way forward is certainly diversity and using cuttings and using things like Guillaume said to kind of, think about the place rather than the clone. I think we always have that site and climate, and then kind of clone is lower down for us. We want the place, it's one part of it, but it's not the end all be all. So certainly trying to preserve some diversity. I see, just to answer, there's the question there, but why do they have California names? It's mostly just people who brought them over or the vineyard where they planted them, whether they imported them or they stole them off the ground or whatever they did to get them here. That's where they get those California names.
Yeah, when we go into a vineyard and take a selection of budwood from a vineyard and take it out, we often reference the vineyard name or something like that rather than the clones, obviously. One of the things we learned early on in Vit School, and I was in Vit School before probably most of you were born, except maybe Gary, of course. And sorry, Gary. But we were taught to build homogeneous blocks, mostly for farming, so that everything was farmed the same. You instructed your workers to go in and do X, and they could do the same thing to every vine because every vine was theoretically the same or at the same place of its maturation, et cetera. And we were taught to do that as a way of managing your farming. So it's an interesting change. And there's always the conflict between that which makes things more efficient and therefore less expensive, and that which often makes things more complicated, but really build character and diversity and quality. And I think if you've heard anything today, you hear that everybody as a winemaker is absolutely, or a winery owner is absolutely dedicated to the quality that they can provide. So whatever it takes is kind of the answer. Julia, anything else before we close our day?
I think that's it. Thank you, everybody. Eugenia, wanna wrap it up for us?
Yeah, I want to thank everybody. I really am excited about the James Beard House donation that we will be making, particularly because it's a new fund. They create funds often, in this new fund, we're going to be one of the first gifters, and it is for Black and Indigenous businesses in the food and beverage industry. And we're pretty excited about being a participant in that. It was just a double-edged win for us, so we're pretty excited. So I'd like to thank our panelists here. Thank you for taking the time from your day. And our audience, who is hopefully all over the country and maybe even all over the world, we thank you for joining us today. And we hope to see you on our auction platform next week. Thanks so much.
That's right. Thank you, everybody. I have dropped information about the auction in the chat, as well as the link to register to bid if you are a trade and you have not done so. We'll see you next week, August 11th, 12th, and 13th. And thanks, everyone. Cheers.
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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Cheers.